There is a town in New South Wales where 5 men vanished without a trace in 1880, and nobody, not the government, not a formal inquiry, not 145 years of amateur detectives, has ever worked out what happened to them. Their boat was found deliberately wrecked. A revolver bullet was in it. 5 sets of personal belongings were neatly arranged on a coat, and the 5 men were simply gone. That bay is still called Mystery Bay today. New South Wales is supposed to be the friendly one. Sydney, Bondi, Vivid Festival. Sorry about the traffic. But what doesn't make it onto the destination guide is the other New South Wales. The one where a small town homestead has 10 confirmed ghost residents and its elderly caretaker still tells visitors someone grabbed her shoulder when she was alone in the house. The one where a Victorian railway tunnel stored mustard gas during World War II and now produces a faceless woman who's been appearing at the exact spot where she was killed by a train. The one where the Aboriginal people knew a place as Benumia, the dark places. And they were not wrong. These are real towns in New South Wales, most of them still on the map, some still inhabited, and the history of each one is either deeply dark, deeply weird, or both. Subscribe now, let's break it down. We start in a valley in the Southern Highlands, about 2 hours southwest of Sydney, where an entire town quietly disappeared and the bush swallowed it whole. Joaja was established in 1878 by the Australian Kerosene Oil and Mineral Company to mine the vast deposits of kerosene shale sitting in the valley walls. The company imported its workers directly from Scotland. More than 1,300 men, women, and children brought to the other side of the world. They built a full town in the valley, houses, a school, a hospital, a school of arts building, a bakery, and a cemetery. Because the valley was so steep and isolated, the town was almost entirely self-sufficient for its first decade, with all supplies hauled in and out by bullock teams. A narrow gauge railway eventually connected Joaja to the main line at Mittagong, which made things slightly easier, but by 1911, the shale deposit had run dry and the economics collapsed. The company was sold off, the workers dispersed, and the town was simply abandoned. No fires, no floods, no dramatic disaster, just the people walking away and the valley going quiet. What is left today is extraordinary. The sandstone school building still stands, still recognizable. The School of Arts Hall is there. Rows of stone cottages known as Carrington Row have been slowly consumed by vegetation. The kerosene ovens and refinery machinery remain where they were left over 100 years ago. The cemetery still holds the people who died here and never left. The whole valley sits as a New South Wales heritage listed site and can be visited on guided tours. And the creepiness isn't performed or narrated for tourists. It just exists because 1,300 people lived their entire lives in this valley, then vanished, leaving everything behind exactly as it was. The ruins have been sitting undisturbed for more than a century. Some of the stone walls are still at full height. Children are buried in that cemetery whose families did not even stay long enough to move their graves when they left. That is the kind of history that gets into the air of a place and stays there. Joaja was abandoned quietly. Bermagui's story is louder and stranger. 5 men vanished there, and the whole country talked about it for decades. Bermagui is a small fishing town on the New South Wales south coast, about 350 kilometers south of Sydney. It is genuinely beautiful, but it carries a mystery that has never been explained, and that mystery is so deeply strange it gave a nearby bay its name. On Sunday, the 10th of October, 1880, 5 men departed Bermagui by boat. They were Lamont Young, a 29-year-old government geological surveyor who had been sent to examine newly discovered gold fields. His field assistant Max Schneider recently arrived from Germany, and 3 local men who owned and crewed the small fishing boat. The party set out in the evening. They were seen heading north along the coast. They were never seen again. 3 days later, a farm worker riding near a point on the coast noticed something shining on the rocks. He dismounted and walked closer. It was the fishing boat, painted green, deliberately wrecked on a rock shelf. The mast and sail were tied together. Rocks and personal belongings, pillows, blankets, clothing, had been thrown into the stern. A book about geology was lying in it with the name Lamont Young written on the front page. A revolver bullet was found in the boat. The spent copper cartridge case was found in the sand about 30 meters away. Tobacco pipes were arranged on a clean coat with strange precision. There were no bodies. There were no footprints from any direction other than those of the man who found it. The boat had been wrecked there, intentionally, and 5 men had simply ceased to exist. A government inquiry was held in 1883. Investigators concluded it was almost certainly not an accident. The arrangement of the boat and belongings suggested deliberate staging. The bullet suggested violence. But who killed 5 men on a remote coastline in 1880 and then vanished as completely as their victims? No theory has ever been proven. No remains were ever found. The area where the boat was discovered was officially renamed Mystery Bay, and it is called that still today. Bermagui is a lovely town and the people there are warm and friendly, but you can drive up to Mystery Bay, walk down to the monument erected in 1980 for the centenary of the disappearance, look out at the exact stretch of coast where the wrecked boat was found, and understand why 145 years of people have never stopped wondering what happened there. Bermagui's mystery has no answer. Jenolan's caves have an answer. They named the darkness themselves thousands of years ago, and the name stuck. Jenolan Caves is not technically a town in the traditional sense. It is a village that grew up around one of the most extraordinary natural features on the planet, and it carries the weight of that feature's age and reputation in ways that are hard to shake off. The Gundungura people, the traditional custodians of this land, knew the cave system for thousands of years before European arrival. Their name for it was Binumia, meaning the dark places. That is worth sitting with for a moment. The first people to spend time here did not name it for the beauty of the formations or the wonder of the underground rivers. They named it for its darkness. It was dark in meaning as well as in light. The cave system itself is genuinely staggering. CSIRO research found the clay in the caves dates to approximately 340 million years old, making Jenolan the oldest known open cave system on the planet. 11 caves are open to the public, including chambers with formations called the Temple of Baal, the River Styx, the Chamber of Moloch, and the Angel's Wing. The naming conventions alone carry an atmosphere. The ghost stories at Jenolan center heavily on James Wybird, the third caretaker of the caves, who began his role in 1903 and became a passionate and obsessive explorer of the system. Staff and guides have long maintained that Wybird loved the caves so deeply in life that he never left them in death. Security gates rattle without cause. Display lights switch on and off without anyone near the controls. Phantom figures appear in cave photographs. A ghostly presence has been reported on the upper floors of Cave's house, the Victorian-era guest house built for visitors. Guides who have worked there for years describe experiences they cannot explain. A Legends, Mysteries, and Ghost Tour runs on Saturday evenings, taking visitors through the cave system by torchlight with no set route. Multiple paranormal investigators have held events at the site over the years. The cave's own management acknowledges the stories openly, and in the very deepest parts of the cave, hundreds of meters below the surface, in chambers that have been dark for millions of years, you are genuinely alone with whatever is in there. The caves at Jenolan have held their darkness for 340 million years. Maitland's jail has only held its darkness for 150, but it made each year count. Maitland is a regional city in the Hunter Valley, about 160 kilometers north of Sydney, and it has many layers, but the layer that stays with you is the jail. Maitland Jail is Australia's oldest substantially intact country jail. The foundation stone was laid in 1844 using locally quarried sandstone. The first prisoners arrived in December 1848. The jail operated as a working correctional facility for 150 years, which means that from the time the Sydney Opera House was a gleam in an architect's eye through to the end of the 20th century, real human beings were incarcerated, punished, and occasionally executed inside these walls. It was the only jail in the country still using solitary confinement cells measuring just 8 feet by 5 feet well into the modern era. The last prisoner left in 1998. 16 men were executed by hanging at Maitland Jail between 1849 and 1897, all for murder or rape. Until 1861, these executions were public. Crowds gathered to watch. Bodies were left hanging for up to an hour after death. The last man executed here was Charles Hines in May 1897, who insisted on his innocence of raping his stepdaughter until the moment the trapdoor opened. Among those imprisoned at Maitland over its 150-year history was Ivan Milat, the backpacker serial killer, the Anita Cobby murderers, the notorious escape artist Darcy Dugan. This was not a minor provincial lockup. This was a hard place where genuinely dangerous people were held under genuinely brutal conditions. A riot in 1975 saw inmates set fire to the maintenance block and attack prison of ficers with homemade weapons. The last corporal punishment in New South Wales, a flogging, was carried out at Maitland in 1905. The last person flogged at the jail for homosexuality was also in 1905. These events happened in a building that was still open and operational within the lifetimes of people who are alive today. The jail is now a heritage-listed tourist attraction offering self-guided audio tours and ghost hunting evenings. The cells are unimaginably small. The scratched messages on the walls are real. The smell of old stone in confined spaces is real. A 5.5-meter escape tunnel discovered in cell 7 of Sea Wing in 1980 is real. And the atmosphere of the place, even with guided tour groups moving through it on a sunny afternoon, is unlike anything else you will experience in New South Wales. Maitland's jail housed living criminals for 150 years. Barima's jail has been haunted for almost as long, and its most famous ghost is a serial killer who still hasn't left. Barima is a Georgian colonial village in the Southern Highlands, about 110 kilometers southwest of Sydney. It was established in 1831 and was planned to be the administrative capital of the region. That plan eventually failed. The railway bypassed it, and as a result, the village never grew, never modernized, and sits today as one of the most completely intact examples of early Australian colonial architecture anywhere in the country. Every building is original or near original. No new houses were built for nearly 100 years after the railway was rerouted. The Barima Courthouse is described as one of the most haunted buildings in Australia. Built between 1833 and 1838 in a striking Greco-Roman style, it held the first trial by jury in New South Wales in 1843. Over the course of its active years, 12 capital cases were decided here, meaning 12 people were sentenced to hang. The executions took place at the Barima Gaol next door, built by convict labor, and opened in 1844. The most notorious prisoner at Barima was John Lynch, widely considered Australia's first serial killer. Lynch confessed to murdering at least 9 people, including women and children, across the Southern Highlands in the 1840s. He was tried, convicted, and hanged at Barima Gaol. Another notorious inmate was Lucretia Dunkley, the only woman ever hanged at Barima, convicted of murdering her husband. Ghost tour operators at the courthouse have identified multiple resident spirits from these cases, with guides reporting cold spots, disembodied sounds, and unexplained touches during night investigations. The Surveyor General Inn, built in 1834 and holding a continuous license since 1839, is reputedly patronized by the ghost of a former bushranger. Harper's Mansion, a National Trust property, was used as a Roman Catholic Presbyterian convent and has its own history of unexplained activity. At night, with the sandstone courthouse and jail walls lit by the occasional street lamp against the surrounding silence of the bush, Barima earns every bit of its eerie reputation. The Barima Gaol itself has had a particularly varied afterlife. It has been a freezing works, a munitions depot, a World War I internment camp for German nationals, and is currently a correctional facility again. Its history is so dense and so layered that the building has never had a chance to stop accumulating stories. Barima's ghosts are from the 1840s. Hartley's are even older. This former colonial outpost on the edge of the Blue Mountains has been gathering its dead since 1834. Hartley is a historic village at the western edge of the Blue Mountains, about 2 hours northwest of Sydney, on the old road between Sydney and the interior of New South Wales. It was, in the colonial era, an important stopping point, the first significant settlement beyond the mountains for travelers heading inland. That made it strategically important, and important colonial settlements in 19th century New South Wales meant courthouses, and courthouses meant trials, and trials in the 1830s and 1840s often meant bushrangers. The Hartley Courthouse was built in 1837 in the Grecian Revival style and is considered one of the finest examples of colonial Australian architecture still standing. It has 3 separate entrances, one for prisoners, one for the public, and one for magistrates. Inside, you can still see the original cells where convicted bushrangers, cattle thieves, and escaped convicts were held before sentencing. The stocks where prisoners were publicly humiliated are preserved. The atmosphere, even on a bright afternoon, is heavy. What stopped Hartley from growing into something larger was the railway. In the middle of the 19th century, when the railway through the Blue Mountains was being planned, Hartley was the expected route, but the gradient was too steep, the engineering too difficult, and the line was routed through a different pass. The railway never came, the town never grew. The commercial activity that had been building around the courthouse and the coach road slowly drained away. Today, 17 buildings remain in the village, including the courthouse, 2 churches, sandstone inns, and scattered cottages. The New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service manages the site. Ghost tours operate here, with paranormal investigators having conducted sessions at the courthouse on many occasions. But the most persistent story from Hartley isn't connected to the courthouse. It comes from Victoria Pass, the winding road that drops down the western face of the Blue Mountains just south of the village. In 1842, a woman was murdered on this road. The specifics of the case are documented in the Hartley Valley historical records. Since then, there have been persistent accounts of a figure, described as the Woman in Black, appearing on Victoria Pass, particularly at night. The road still exists, people still drive it, and some of them still see her. Hartley's Woman in Black haunts a highway. Silverton's entire landscape looks like something that haunts you before you've even seen a ghost. Silverton is 25 minutes east of Broken Hill, deep in the far west of New South Wales, near the South Australian border. To call it remote is not adequate. It sits in a landscape of flat red earth, white clay pans, and desert saltbush that stretches to every horizon. The sky here is enormous, the silence is complete, and there are currently approximately 50 permanent residents. In a town that once housed over 3,000 people, silver was discovered near Silverton in 1875, and within a decade the town had boomed into a proper settlement with its own newspaper, the Silver Age. 2 banks, a hospital, numerous shops, a Masonic lodge, a church, and a school. Then came the discovery of the vastly richer ore body at Broken Hill in 1883. Within years, the economic rationale for Silverton evaporated. By the turn of the 20th century, the miners had gone, the buildings gradually emptied, the population fell to near zero. What makes Silverton different from most ghost towns is the way it looks. The flat, rocky, ochre-colored landscape around it, the Mundi Mundi Plain stretching out in every direction, has an otherworldly quality that is not metaphor or marketing. George Miller chose this landscape to represent the post-apocalyptic wasteland in Mad Max 2. The film was shot here in 1981 and around the surrounding outback. So did the crew of The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Razorback, and Mission Impossible 2. And more than 140 other films and commercials. When filmmakers need a landscape that feels inherently post-human, they keep coming to Silverton. The Daydream Mine, just outside of town, operated from 1883 to 1983 and is open for tours. Former miners who have worked there claim the old shafts are haunted by workers who died underground. The mine's narrow passages and low ceilings at depth have a specific quality that visitors consistently find unsettling. The Silverton Jail Museum preserves the original lockup, including the bath that was used to preserve bodies for the coroner in the days before refrigeration. The hotel still serves drinks. The Mad Max 2 Museum still houses a replica of the Interceptor. Silverton is not a place that simply looks abandoned. It is a place where the landscape itself communicates something about the fragility of human presence. You're looking at what happens when the reason for a town's existence disappears, and the land reclaims what was always going to be its anyway. Silverton was left to the desert. Hill End was left to the gold rush ghosts. And they're still very much in residence, according to everyone who does the night tours. At its peak in the early 1870s, Hill End had a population of around 8,000 people. It had 5 banks, 8 churches, 2 newspapers, and 28 hotels and pubs. It had doctors, tailors, watchmakers, a pharmacy, and a full complement of businesses serving a gold rush community at the height of its boom. Today, 111 people live in Hill End. The gold began running out in the mid-1870s, and the decline was rapid. By the turn of the century, the population was under 500. By the mid-20th century, Hill End was practically deserted. The site was proclaimed a historic site in 1967 and is now managed by National Parks and Wildlife Service. Most of the remaining buildings date to the 1870s. The Royal Hotel, the one pub left standing from the original 28, is still open. The paranormal activity at Hill End is not a quiet, subtle thing. Chantal Webb, who founded Out West Paranormal Ghost Tours in 2020 and operates from the town, describes it plainly. The streets alone are haunted, and it's a very, very, very active place. So people will often report seeing apparitions, shadows, and dark figures either in the distance or standing directly behind someone in the group. Why does Hill End carry so much? The history gives you the answer. During the gold rush, people arrived from all over the world. From Europe, from China, from across Australia. They were far from medical help, far from any authority, and operating in conditions of genuine danger. A week away from Bathurst and Mudgee by carriage, as Webb puts it. People who became sick often simply died without care. There were murders. There were suicides. There were accidents at the mines. There were drownings. There were grisly killings that made it into court records and newspaper archives under headlines about sly grog sales, insanity cases, accidental shootings, and intentional drownings. The hospital grounds are reportedly the most active location in the town. Tour participants have reported their hands being grabbed, seeing human hair being visibly yanked near the old hospital ruins, and witnessing apparitions in the surrounding dark. Outlines of figures have been reported in the cemetery. The abandoned lots in the main street display historic photographs of the businesses that once stood there, which means you walk through a street of ghost images of what used to exist in a town haunted by what no longer does. Hill End has 111 people and 28 pubs worth of ghosts. Junee has 1 homestead and 10 confirmed spirits, and the owner still lives with them. Junee is a small town of about 5,000 people in the Riverina region of New South Wales, roughly halfway between Sydney and Melbourne on the main inland route. It is best known to most people who know it at all for the Monte Cristo Homestead, a double-story Victorian manor built on a hill overlooking the town in 1885, which has marketed itself for decades as Australia's most haunted house. And unlike most places that make that claim, Junee has the documentation to back it up. The homestead was built by Christopher William Crawley, a farmer who made his fortune when the Great Southern Railway line expanded into the area in 1878, and he constructed the Railway Hotel next to the new station. He built Monte Cristo for his family in 1885 and lived there in considerable prosperity until his death in 1910. After his death, his wife Elizabeth became a recluse, rarely leaving the property for the next 23 years. When she died in 1933, the house passed to caretakers, fell into decay, and was largely abandoned until Reginald and Olive Ryan purchased it in 1963 and spent the rest of their lives restoring it. The ghosts at Monte Cristo are not vague sensations or cold spots. They are specific, named, and documented through decades of consistent visitor accounts. Elizabeth Crawley, the reclusive widow, is said to still guard the homestead from upstairs. The nursemaid who dropped and killed the 10-month-old granddaughter Ethel on the main staircase in 1917 is reportedly still present near those stairs. One of 2 maids allegedly impregnated by Christopher Crawley jumped to her death from the balcony. A ghostly bloodstain is said to mark the spot. The second maid's son, Harold, was seriously brain injured in a coach accident as a young child and was subsequently kept chained in the coach room. Local children taunted him. He eventually died there. His presence has been reported in that room consistently across many years of investigations. A caretaker was murdered on the property in the 1960s, adding more recent trauma to the already layered history. The homestead has featured in television programs including Ghost Hunters International and My Ghost Story, as well as a horror mockumentary film. Saturday night ghost tours ran for decades until the death of longtime owner Olive Ryan in her mid-90s. The property was listed for sale in 2025, the first time in 62 years. What makes Monte Cristo different from a typical haunted house tourist attraction is the consistency. Across 50 years of visitor accounts, the same apparitions, the same cold spots, the same phenomena recur in the same locations. The current owners have always acknowledged what is there. Olive Ryan, interviewed in her 90s, was matter-of-fact about it. "I've had a hand on my shoulder. I've had my name called when I've been here by myself. I've heard footsteps on the balcony and gone out and there's no one there." A 91-year-old woman living alone in Australia's most haunted house, and her main complaint was the footsteps on the balcony. Junee is a remarkable place. Junee has 10 ghosts and 1 extraordinary homestead. Picton has an entire town, and it has officially been Australia's most haunted since before anyone started making the lists. Picton is a small historic town about 80 kilometers southwest of Sydney, nestled at the foot of the Razorback Range. On the surface, it looks like dozens of other old Southern Highlands townships. Beautiful sandstone buildings, a main street with pubs and cafes, quiet residential streets, a railway station, and then you start to look at the history. Picton is officially recognized as Australia's most haunted town. Not self-proclaimed, recognized. The sites that make up its paranormal reputation are so numerous and so well documented that the designation has stuck for decades across tourism, journalism, and paranormal research alike. The centerpiece is the Mushroom Tunnel, formerly known as the Red Bank Range Railway Tunnel, built in 1867 as part of the Great Southern Railway. The tunnel was constructed to carry trains through the Razorback Range and was used for railway operations until 1919, when a better graded alternative route was established. During World War II, the abandoned tunnel was used as a storage facility for mustard gas and ammunition. After the war, it was used as a mushroom farm, hence the name. It is 180 meters long, curved slightly so you cannot see from one end to the other, cold even in summer, and home to the most famous ghost in Picton's history. In December 1916, a local woman named Emily Ballard entered the tunnel. She never came out. She was struck by a train while inside. Whether by accident or by choice is still unknown. Her ghost has been consistently reported since. Visitors describe a pale figure at the center of the tunnel, cameras that malfunction without explanation, sudden sharp drops in temperature, and the phantom screech of a train that was decommissioned a century ago. Emily appears without a face. She stands in the dark where she died and says nothing, but the tunnel is only the start. St. Mark's Cemetery contains the graves of two children whose ghosts have been photographed together. Blanche Moon, who died in 1886 at age 11 after a stack of railway sleepers collapsed on her, and David Shaw, who died in 46 at age 7 from polio. In January 2010, a visiting family photographed what appeared to be two children in colonial clothing playing in the cemetery. The children in the photograph died 60 years apart. The Wollondilly Shire Hall has reported a bearded man in an old-fashioned suit, a mischievous boy, and a laughing girl. The old maternity hospital, now a private residence, produces the sound of phantom newborns crying and what longtime residents describe as the presence of a stern matron who has not left her post. The Imperial Hotel's jukeboxes have reportedly played music while unplugged. Down at Stone Quarry Creek, from which several people drowned over the years, mysterious splashing sounds continue without a visible source. It is worth noting that the Mushroom Tunnel is now closed to the public for safety reasons. The tours that once took people through it by torchlight have been shut down. The council has fenced it off, but the fence does not stop people going. Every year, people who have read the stories and want to see for themselves find their way in. And every year, some of them come back with accounts of what they found, and some of them don't want to talk about it at all. That perhaps is the most honest endorsement any haunted place can get. If this video showed you a New South Wales you didn't know existed, subscribe and drop a comment below with which of these 10 stayed with you. And if you visited any of them and had an experience you can't explain, tell us, because the comment section for this kind of video is always more interesting than the video itself. See you in the next one.